Okay, I've talked a lot about writing dynamic strokes for Chinese characters, but there's actually a secret tool that I've been using that I've never talked about. And here it is. So it's a microfiber cloth I put underneath my paper. And what this does is it allows the pen to kind of sink into the paper if I press harder to create thicker strokes. And if I want a thin stroke, I just press lightly and let it glide over the paper. And if we go ahead and flip over this paper, you can see where the pen really presses into the paper. And that's how you get your thicker strokes. As for the pen, I have an update on that as well. So I've been using the Zebra Sarasa clip, and it comes in all sorts of crazy colors. You have to get the metallic version. Here's the packaging for it. So this pen uses a slightly different ink than most other gel pens. I find it to be a little bit stickier, and it tends to not seep into the paper, and it kind of just stays on top of the paper mostly. Now, the reason I say you have to get the metallic version is because I also have the regular version, which I thought would be the same thing, but the ink is different in the metallic version versus the regular version. And the regular version is a good pen, but it just acts like a normal gel pen, whereas the metallic one seems to be a little bit easier to use than a regular gel pen. While this is my favorite pen for now, there are some weaknesses. The first is obviously the color choice. I love these colors, but some days I just want a black, and I can't get the same results with a black pen, with a black version of this pen. The other problem is it's really good at writing almost all strokes except for a short hook stroke. So let me show you what that looks like here. So if I want to make a quick short hook right here, it's hard to get that tip to be really sharp. I think because this ink is a little too sticky, it tends to congeal on itself and doesn't want to spread out. So the short hook stroke is actually a lot easier on my old favorite pen, which is the Pilot Precise V7. Let me show you what that looks like. But you can see here that the point is a lot sharper on this pen versus the Zebra. Honestly though, the process of finding a perfect pen for Chinese characters has been kind of frustrating for me. I've tried a lot of pens and I still haven't found the perfect one. I've seen some amazing clips of calligraphy online, but they're all from China and they're all supposedly using gel pens, but I'm pretty sure they're different than the gel pens I'm using because these pens never in a million years are going to write quite like that. Okay, next I'm going to briefly go over the basics of writing calligraphy strokes. Keep in mind that there are different styles of calligraphy, and what I'm teaching you, what this looks like, this is called Kaishu, which is standard script. And the digital font modeling this style is called Kaiti, which is something I talked about in a previous video. You can go watch that too. It's on my channel. I'll have it linked right up here. So there's basically three different types of stroke in Chinese calligraphy. There's what I'm going to call a front-loaded stroke, which is a stroke that starts off heavy and then tapers out. And there's a back-loaded stroke, which is a stroke that starts off light and then becomes heavier. And then there's strokes that combine elements of both, which is like your standard horizontal stroke. It starts thick, ends thick, and is lighter in the middle. So I recommend beginners starting with front-loaded strokes first because those are easier to get or to learn. And there's basically three of them. So the first one is your PS stroke, like in the Mu character right here. This stroke right here that I'm writing, that's a front-loaded stroke. So it starts off heavy right here and then it lightens out. And then this one's a back-loaded stroke, which we won't worry about for now. The other one is a T, like in the hand radical right here. This stroke starts heavy and then lightens out. And then we can finish off this character, write something, I don't know. And the last one is just your hook character. Oh, I should have used that to demonstrate the hook character. Well, so the hook stroke starts heavy right at this point, and then it pulls out. Backloaded strokes are most prominent in the right slanting stroke, like we saw here. You also see it in the female radical, or the women radical. It's not a sharp point. You kind of like lean into it. Let me write it again for you. Kind of lean into it. And this is actually a really good character to demonstrate it because you also see it in the dot right here. So again, the dot stroke is not a front-loaded stroke. It's not heavy and then lightens out. It's light and it goes heavy. Okay, I kind of messed that one up. Light and goes heavy like this. Okay, should not have written on there. Let me try that again. There. So finally, let's talk about double-loaded strokes, which are usually in horizontal and vertical strokes, like your very standard, like this is the first stroke you need to master, your horizontal stroke in calligraphy. How you write this is you lean into the stroke at the beginning, and then line up, and then lean into it again at the end. I didn't quite lighten enough in the middle here But with the vertical stroke, it's the same thing. There's like a lean in at the top, you line up, and at the bottom there's a little, in Chinese it's called 手笔. So this comes from using a brush, right? It's how you release your brush from the paper, and usually you don't want a hard release or a sloppy release. So at the end of a vertical stroke, you would kind of curl it back a little bit. But you can actually write your horizontal strokes and vertical strokes differently depending on where it is in the character. So let me demonstrate. If it's a short horizontal stroke, it's usually backloaded actually. So like in this character, I wrote it really ugly. The long stroke would be double loaded. And then we go ahead and write the rest of it. If the vertical stroke is in a radical, like in the heart radical here, it's usually double loaded. But if it's the only stroke going down, actually in this character, 时, it should be tapering out. So 时 actually kind of looks like this. Another interesting thing is how these strokes are used in boxes. So if you have a large box, your first stroke, the vertical stroke, is usually front loaded like that. And then you have this. And then this stroke usually have like a hook. That's not really part of the stroke, it's more of a flare. And then close it off. I only want to introduce you guys to the main categories of strokes right now, because if I went through each individual stroke and taught you all the intricacies, that would be enough for a full course, which I might make in the future, but I don't really feel like I'm qualified for that right now. Okay, so the next concept I want to go through is how exactly do you make the stroke shape that you want? So in the beginning of the video, I explained that pressure is the key to varying the width of the stroke, but there's another factor, which is speed. So if I press down harder, I get a thicker stroke, right? But if I go faster, I also can get a lighter stroke. Even if I press down really hard and go fast, the stroke will lighten out. Versus if I press down hard and go slow, then I just get a thick stroke all the way through. So what I try to do is I always try to vary the width of the stroke by pressure and not speed, and only use speed if I have to. So where do I use speed? Let's just observe how I write this character first. So you'll notice that I use speed when there's sharp points. When there's turns in the stroke, I will often use a quick stroke to go to the next point. And what that does is it gives a bit more variation in the strokes and a bit more character. So let me show you that part again. So again, quick. Okay, now I can't do this and explain at the same time. Okay, forget about that. I can't talk and write it at the same time. I'll just play back the clip. The other time I use speed is when the stroke tapers out. So like in this stroke right here, you'll notice that I flick through it. But if a character doesn't really have any of those, like in this character that I'm writing right now, then I'll just go slow. And then I'm mostly using pressure here. You see that the only time I flicked it was at the very end, because you don't want your back-ended strokes to end on a hard dot like that. You want it to end at a thick point and then just slightly give it a, I didn't do it right, slightly give it a taper. So that's another time where you need to do a little flick. You need to use speed to create a little bit of taper at the end. The final aspect that you really need to notice before you get too caught up with all the stroke stuff is you need to understand the hierarchy of strokes. And this is something I really did not pay attention to when I first started, and when I fixed it, it made a huge difference. Now what I'm talking about is when you have a box character, okay, let me just write an arbitrary box, which stroke goes on top of which stroke? They're not all just interconnected, with no hierarchy at the corners. So in a large box, your first stroke has hierarchy, so that stroke goes over the next stroke. So the next stroke should go like this, underneath it, and then that comes down, right? Because this is technically one stroke. And then you can do your hook, flare, or whatever. And then at the bottom, your vertical stroke also has hierarchy, so your bottom stroke has to go underneath your vertical stroke and then hit this stroke over here. Now, I totally exaggerated this. Obviously, this is not how it should look. If I write it nicely, here's what it looks like. But if you write this incorrectly, it'll look, well, I guess kind of ugly. It won't have as much character. The thing with boxes is, just like the vertical strokes and horizontal strokes when we were talking about back here, there's actually two types of boxes. There's a large box and there's a small box. So when you have a box in a radical like here, like that, okay, it's a different hierarchy. So the first stroke is the same, the next stroke goes underneath it, and that goes down. But here, their last stroke goes underneath your left stroke and above your right stroke, okay? So if I make that a little bigger, this is what the diagram looks like. And if we put that all together in a character, here's what that would look like. And of course, it's not just confined to boxes. Whenever you have, like, say, a radical here, the ear radical, this stroke goes underneath your vertical stroke, all right? And not over it. So where does that leave us? Well, this is certainly not a full tutorial on Chinese calligraphy. And the thing is, a lot of people have been asking on my videos, you know, how do you write so nicely? Or like, teach me how to write like you or whatever. But the thing is, I've only been practicing calligraphy for 9 months and I'm 90% self-taught. So frankly, I feel like it'd be irresponsible of me to come out with any kind of tutorial on how to do Chinese calligraphy. But it is something that I'm really interested in, and it's a skill that I plan on reaching mastery in. So I just wanted to make a video to answer some of your basic questions, and when I feel like I'm qualified, I definitely plan on making even like a full course in the future, teaching you guys exactly how to get into Chinese calligraphy and enjoy it to its fullest potential. So until then, keep practicing, and I'll share bits and pieces with you as much as I can. 我们下次再见了，拜拜。